My cousin Marina took $3,000 from my purse while I was in the bathroom at our family reunion. And when I caught her red-handed, my uncle looked me dead in the eye and said, "Prove it." Little did he know I was about to serve him proof on a silver platter that would make his jaw drop so hard it would leave permanent marks on the floor. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sophia, and this story begins on a Saturday afternoon that should have been perfect. I'd been saving for 18 months to buy my first car, working double shifts at the local diner, picking up weekend catering gigs, even selling my grandmother's vintage jewelry that I'd inherited. Every dollar mattered because I was finally close to my goal. $3,000 in cash, carefully counted and recounted, sitting in an envelope inside my purse. The family reunion was at Uncle Richard's house, the same uncle who'd always treated me like I was somehow less than his own children. Marina, his daughter, had always been the golden child. Perfect grades, perfect boyfriend, perfect everything according to the family narrative. While I worked my way through community college, she got her education handed to her on a silver platter. While I saved every penny, she got a brand new BMW for her 21st birthday. I remember walking into that backyard barbecue feeling genuinely happy for once. The envelope in my purse represented freedom, independence, the ability to stop bumming rides and taking 3 buses to get to work. I'd planned to go car shopping the very next Monday. The salesman at the Honda dealership had already shown me a reliable used Civic that was perfect for my budget. The afternoon started normally enough. Cousins catching up, aunts gossiping about neighborhood drama, uncles arguing about sports teams. I helped Aunt Catherine set up the dessert table, played with the younger kids on the swing set, and even managed to have a decent conversation with Marina about her upcoming graduation from the state university. That's when nature called. I excused myself to use the bathroom, setting my purse down on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker. It was a quick trip, maybe 3 minutes total. When I came back, my purse was exactly where I'd left it. Zipper closed, everything looking completely normal. It wasn't until I got home that evening that I discovered the envelope was gone. Not misplaced, not fallen out somewhere, completely gone. I tore apart my car, searched every pocket, dumped out the entire contents of my purse twice. Nothing. 18 months of sacrifice, $3,000 in carefully saved cash, vanished into thin air. The sick feeling in my stomach kept me awake all night. I replayed every moment of the reunion, trying to remember who had access to the kitchen, who might have seen me with the purse. But deep down, I already knew. Marina had offered to help me carry drinks from the kitchen to the backyard table right after I'd used the bathroom. She'd insisted on carrying my purse along with the drink tray, claiming it would be easier with both hands free. At the time, I thought it was sweet of her to help. Now I realized it was calculated. The next morning, I called Uncle Richard directly. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number, but I forced my voice to stay steady. This was my family. Surely they would want to make this right. "Uncle Richard, I need to talk to you about something serious that happened yesterday." "What's going on, Sophie?" I took a deep breath and explained everything. The missing money, the timing, Marina's convenient offer to help carry my things. I tried to keep emotion out of it, just stating the facts as clearly as possible. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Uncle Richard, are you there?" "I'm here." His voice had turned cold, distant. "Sophie, that's a very serious accusation you're making against my daughter." "I'm not accusing anyone specifically. I'm just telling you what happened and hoping maybe you could ask her about it." Another pause. Then the words that would haunt me for weeks. "If you're going to make claims like that about Marina, you better have some real proof. My daughter doesn't need to steal money from anyone. She has everything she needs." "But Uncle Richard, the money was there before and gone after. The only people who had access were family members." "Proof, Sophie. Bring me proof or don't bring me accusations." He hung up. I stared at my phone in disbelief. This was the same uncle who had taught me to ride a bike when I was 7, who'd given me my first job mowing his lawn when I needed spending money in high school. Now he was treating me like some kind of criminal, making false accusations against his precious daughter.
But what hurt even more was the family group chat that started blowing up an hour later. Apparently, Uncle Richard had shared our conversation and the responses made my blood boil. Marina, I can't believe Sophie would even suggest something like that. I'm so hurt. Aunt Catherine, money can make people paranoid. Maybe she just misplaced it. Jake, why would Marina need to steal money? Her dad bought her a BMW. Uncle Richard, let's just drop this unless Sophie can prove what she's claiming. The implication was clear. I was the family troublemaker, making wild accusations without evidence. Marina was the victim of my jealousy and desperation. The narrative had been written, and I was cast as the villain. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. If Uncle Richard wanted proof, I was going to give him proof. But first, I needed to do some investigating. I drove back to Uncle Richard's neighborhood the next evening, not to his house, but to the small strip mall about 2 blocks away. Marina had mentioned during the reunion that she had stopped at the ATM there on her way to the party because she needed cash for gas. She'd made a big show of complaining about the fees for using an out-of-network machine. The strip mall had 3 businesses: a nail salon, a pizza place, and a convenience store. The ATM was positioned right in between the pizza place and the store, clearly visible from both establishments. I walked into the pizza place first, ordered a slice, and casually asked the teenage worker behind the register about their security cameras. Oh yeah, we've got cameras everywhere. Owner got robbed like 3 years ago, so now he's paranoid about security. That camera right there, he pointed to one mounted above the register, has a perfect view of the ATM. My heart started racing. How long do you keep the footage? I think it's like 30 days or something. Why? I made up a story about my car getting keyed in the parking lot and needing to check the footage. The kid was sympathetic, but explained I'd need to talk to the owner, who wouldn't be in until Thursday. Thursday felt like an eternity, but I used the time to do more research. I drove by Marina's apartment complex, noting the security cameras at the entrance. I checked her social media posts from the day of the reunion, looking for any timeline clues. I even called the Honda dealership to see if they could hold the car that I wanted for a few more days.
When he returned, he was carrying a tablet and wearing a puzzled expression. So I found your time frame, and there was definitely activity at the ATM during those hours. But I'm not seeing any car damage in the parking lot. You sure about the timing? My mouth went dry. Could I just take a quick look at the footage? Maybe I had the wrong day. Tony hesitated for a moment, then turned the tablet toward me. I shouldn't really do this, but you seem genuine. Here's the ATM footage from Saturday afternoon. What I saw on that screen made my hands tremble. There was Marina, clear as day, walking up to the ATM at exactly 3:47 p.m. She inserted a card, waited, then inserted a second card. 2 separate transactions. She pulled out cash from both withdrawals, counted it, and then did something that made my breath catch. She pulled out her phone and took a selfie with the cash fanned out in front of her face. Can you rewind that part? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Tony rewound the footage. There it was again, Marina grinning at her phone camera, holding what looked like a significant amount of cash. But the timestamp showed this was happening during the reunion, which meant she should have been at her father's house helping with the barbecue. Is there any way I could get a copy of this footage? I asked. Tony looked uncomfortable. I'm not supposed to give out copies without a police report or subpoena, but he glanced around the empty restaurant. If someone happened to record their phone while looking at the screen, I couldn't stop them. I understood immediately. Could I look at it one more time? I want to make sure I have the right time frame. This time, I discreetly started recording on my phone while Tony replayed the footage. I captured Marina's approach to the ATM, both card transactions, the cash counting, and that damning selfie. Thank you so much for your help, I told Tony. You've been incredibly kind. Hope you catch whoever messed with your car, he replied, though something in his expression suggested he knew there was more to my story. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes, watching the footage over and over on my phone. The evidence was undeniable. Marina had made 2 ATM transactions during the time she claimed to be at the reunion. But I needed more than just this to build an airtight case. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I created a fake social media account and searched for Marina's posts from the day of the reunion.
What I found was like striking gold. At 4:15 p.m., just 28 minutes after the ATM footage, Marina had posted a photo from Uncle Richard's backyard with the caption, "Family time is the best time. So grateful for these moments." The timestamp proved she'd driven from the ATM back to the reunion and immediately posted as if she'd been there the whole time. But there was something else in the photo that caught my attention. In the background, barely visible, was the kitchen counter where I'd left my purse. I screenshotted everything and saved it to a secure folder on my phone. Then I started planning my next move. The following day, I called Marina directly. I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head dozens of times, but my heart was still pounding when she answered. "Sophie, how are you? I heard about your money situation. That's so awful." Her voice was perfectly sweet, perfectly concerned. If I didn't know better, I would have believed her genuine sympathy. "I'm dealing with it," I replied carefully. "Actually, I was wondering if I could ask you something." "Of course, anything." "Do you remember what time you got to the reunion on Saturday? I'm trying to piece together the timeline of when things might have gone missing." There was the slightest pause before she answered. "Oh, I was there pretty much all afternoon. Got there around 2:30, I think. Why?" I smiled, even though she couldn't see me, just trying to figure out who was around when. "Did you happen to leave at any point during the day?" "No, I don't think so. Well, maybe to grab something from my car, but I never left the property." Another lie. The ATM footage clearly showed her away from the house for at least 45 minutes. "Okay, that's helpful. Thanks, Marina." "Sophie, I really hope you find your money. Maybe check with the reunion venue. Sometimes people turn in lost items." The reunion was at Uncle Richard's house, her own father's house, but she was pretending it was some external venue where things might get lost. The lies were getting more elaborate. After hanging up, I sat down and wrote out everything I knew. The timeline, the evidence, the contradictions in Marina's story. I had enough to prove she was lying about her whereabouts, but I needed to connect it directly to my missing money. That's when I remembered something. During the reunion, Marina had complained about the ATM fees for using an out-of-network machine. She'd specifically mentioned needing cash for gas money. But in the ATM footage, she'd made 2 separate transactions and taken selfies with what looked like far more cash than needed for a gas tank. I decided to take one more risk. I called the bank that owned the ATM and explained that I was trying to track fraudulent activity on my account. It was a stretch, but I gave Marina's approximate transaction time and asked if they could tell me how many withdrawals were made during that time frame. The customer service representative was helpful, but limited in what she could share. "I can see there were multiple transactions during that window, but I can't give you specific amounts or account information without a police report or subpoena." Multiple transactions confirmed what I'd seen in the footage. Marina hadn't just gotten gas money. She'd made 2 separate withdrawals, and I was willing to bet one of them was from my missing cash. But how had she gotten access to my money? That question bothered me for days, until I remembered something that made my stomach drop. 3 weeks before the reunion, Marina and I had gone shopping together for graduation gifts for our younger cousin. We'd stopped at an ATM so I could get cash, and Marina had been standing right behind me when I entered my PIN. At the time, I thought she was just looking at her phone app, but now I realized she'd been watching my fingers. Later that same shopping trip, I'd pulled out my debit card to pay for lunch. Marina had offered to split the bill and insisted on seeing my card to calculate her portion. She'd held it for several minutes, claiming she needed to check something on her app later, long enough to memorize the card number.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The pieces were falling into place. Marina had memorized my card information weeks earlier, then used it to make withdrawals at the ATM during the reunion while also stealing the cash from my purse. She'd covered her tracks by posting photos from the reunion to establish an alibi and lying about her whereabouts when questioned. It was sophisticated, planned, and absolutely devastating. But now I had evidence. The ATM footage, the timeline contradictions, the social media posts, and a clear motive. It was time to present Uncle Richard with the proof he'd demanded. I spent that weekend putting together a comprehensive presentation.
Screenshots, timestamps, a detailed timeline, and the recorded ATM footage. Everything was organized, documented, and irrefutable. Monday morning, I called Uncle Richard again. "I have the proof you asked for," I said without preamble. Another long pause. "What kind of proof?" "The kind that will make you wish you'd believed me the first time. Can we meet today?" "Sophie, I hope you're not about to waste my time with some conspiracy theory." "Uncle Richard, meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street at 2 o'clock. Bring Marina. You're both going to want to see this." I hung up before he could respond. At exactly 2 o'clock, I walked into the coffee shop with my phone, a folder of printed screenshots, and a confidence I hadn't felt in weeks. Uncle Richard was already there, sitting in a corner booth with Marina beside him. They both looked annoyed, like they were humoring a troubled relative. That was about to change. I slid into the booth across from them and placed my phone on the table, the ATM footage already queued up. "You asked for proof," I said, looking directly at Uncle Richard. "Here's your proof." I pressed play. Marina's face went completely white as she watched herself on the screen, approaching the ATM, making 2 transactions, counting cash and taking selfies. Uncle Richard's expression shifted from annoyed to confused to something approaching horror. "This footage is from Saturday afternoon at 3:47 p.m., I explained calmly. "The same day Marina claims she never left your property." Marina opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished." I swiped to the screenshots of her social media posts, showing the timeline and the background image of the kitchen counter. Marina posted this photo at 4:15 p.m., claiming to be at the family reunion. But 28 minutes earlier, she was at an ATM 2 miles away, making withdrawals and photographing herself with cash. Uncle Richard was staring at his daughter, waiting for an explanation. Marina was staring at the table, her face flushed red. And here's the interesting part. Marina told me she never left the property during the reunion, but this footage proves she was gone for at least 45 minutes, the same 45 minutes when my money disappeared from the kitchen. I pulled out the printed timeline I'd created, sliding it across the table. Marina had access to my purse when she offered to help carry drinks. She had memorized my PIN from a shopping trip 3 weeks earlier. She had opportunity, means, and apparently motive. Uncle Richard finally found his voice. "Marina, is this true?" Marina looked up, tears forming in her eyes. "Daddy, I can explain." "Explain what? That you lied to me? That you stole from your cousin?" I was going to pay it back," Marina burst out. "I needed the money for something important, and I knew Sophie was always working, so I thought she had more saved up. I was going to replace it before she even noticed." The confession hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Uncle Richard looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. "You stole $3,000 from Sophie?" "It wasn't supposed to be permanent," Marina said. "I had some debts I needed to pay off quickly, and I knew Sophie wouldn't lend me that much money. I was going to get it back to her within a month." I leaned back in the booth, feeling a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. "Marina, that money was for my first car. I've been saving for 18 months to buy transportation so I can get better jobs and maybe even transfer to a 4-year university. It wasn't just money to me. It was my future." Marina was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Sophie. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." Uncle Richard was silent for a long moment, staring at the evidence spread across the table. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Sophie, I owe you an apology. A huge apology. I should have taken your concerns seriously instead of demanding proof like you were some kind of criminal." "You're right," I said. "You should have." "Marina, you're going to return every penny of that money today, and you're going to face whatever consequences come from this." Marina nodded miserably. "The money's in my savings account. I can transfer it right now." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and began the process of transferring the funds. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with a notification that $3,000 had been deposited into my checking account. But Uncle Richard wasn't finished. "This isn't just about the money, Marina. You lied to me. You stole from family. You let me treat Sophie like she was making false accusations when you knew she was telling the truth. Marina was sobbing now. I know, Daddy. I know I messed up. You didn't mess up, Uncle Richard said firmly. You made a series of deliberate choices to deceive and steal. That's not a mistake. That's a character problem. I watched this family drama unfold with mixed emotions. Part of me felt satisfaction at being vindicated. Part of me felt sad watching Marina's relationship with her father crumble. But mostly, I felt relieved that the truth was finally out. Uncle Richard, I appreciate the apology, and I'm glad the money has been returned. But I think we need to talk about what happens next. He nodded gravely. What do you want to happen, Sophie?
The same family group chat where everyone questioned my integrity should hear the truth from her own mouth. Marina looked panicked. Sophie, please, that's going to humiliate me in front of everyone. You humiliated me first, I replied calmly, when you stole from me and then let everyone think I was paranoid or lying. Fair is fair. Uncle Richard considered this. That's reasonable, Sophie. Marina, you're going to tell the family what you did. But Daddy! No buts. You made this mess, and you're going to clean it up. Marina pulled out her phone again, this time opening the family group chat. With Uncle Richard watching over her shoulder, she typed out a message that would change everything. I need to confess something to everyone. I stole $3,000 from Sophie at the family reunion. She was right to suspect me, and I'm sorry for lying about it. Uncle Richard was right to ask for proof, and Sophie provided it. I'm ashamed of what I did, and I've returned the money. I owe Sophie and all of you a huge apology. She hit send before she could change her mind. Within minutes, the group chat exploded with responses. Aunt Catherine, Marina, what? Why would you do that? Cousin Jake, holy shit, Sophie was telling the truth this whole time. Various cousins, I can't believe this. Marina, how could you? Sophie, I'm so sorry we doubted you. Uncle Richard typed his own message. I owe Sophie an apology for not believing her initially. Marina has returned the money and will be facing appropriate consequences for her actions. I added my own response. Thank you all for the apologies. I hope this serves as a reminder to listen to family members when they come to us with concerns rather than immediately dismissing them. The coffee shop had become uncomfortably quiet during this exchange. Other customers were pretending not to listen, but the tension at our table was obvious. Uncle Richard closed his phone and looked at me seriously. Sophie, I hope you can forgive me for how I handled this. I failed you as an uncle and as someone who should have had your back. I considered his words carefully. Uncle Richard, I appreciate the apology, but this isn't something that can be fixed with just words. You made me feel like I was crazy for reporting a theft. You chose to protect Marina's reputation over finding out the truth. He nodded, accepting the criticism. You're absolutely right. I let my protective instincts as a father override my responsibility to be fair to you. And you made me prove my own victimization instead of investigating fairly from the start. Yes, I did, and that was wrong. Marina had stopped crying and was now staring at her phone, reading the flood of family responses. Her golden child status had officially been revoked. Marina, I said, turning to address her directly, I need you to understand something. This wasn't just about money. You violated my trust, invaded my privacy, and then watched me be humiliated by the family for telling the truth. The fact that you were planning to pay it back doesn't make it any less traumatic for me. She nodded without looking up. I understand. I'm truly sorry, Sophie. I believe you're sorry you got caught. I'm not sure you're sorry you did it. That got her attention. She looked up with fresh tears in her eyes. I am sorry I did it. I know that's hard to believe, but I really am. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get help for whatever issues led you to think stealing from family was acceptable. And you're going to make a public post on your social media acknowledging what you did and apologizing. Sophie, that's fair, Uncle Richard interrupted. Marina, you're going to do exactly what Sophie is asking. And you're going to get counseling to figure out why you thought this was acceptable behavior. I stood up from the booth, gathering my phone and papers. I'm going car shopping this afternoon. The Honda dealership holds the car I want until 5 o'clock. Uncle Richard stood as well. Sophie,
Again, I'm truly sorry. Is there anything else I can do to make this right? I thought about it for a moment. Yes, actually. The next time someone in this family comes to you with a concern about being wronged, believe them first and investigate second. Don't make them prove their own victimization. I will. I promise. Marina finally looked up at me. Sophie, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? I paused at the edge of the booth. Marina, forgiveness isn't something you can demand or expect. It's something that has to be earned over time through changed behavior and making amends. Ask me again in a year. I left them sitting in that coffee shop and drove straight to the Honda dealership. The Civic was still available, and by 6 o'clock that evening, I was driving home in my first car, purchased with money that had been stolen and returned. But the story doesn't end there. Over the next few weeks, the family dynamics shifted dramatically. Cousins who had dismissed my concerns reached out individually to apologize. Aunt Catherine invited me to lunch to make amends for doubting me. Even some of the extended family members who barely knew the details heard the story and expressed support. Marina did follow through on the public social media post, though it was clearly written reluctantly. She admitted to taking money that didn't belong to her and apologized for her actions. The post received dozens of comments, mostly supportive of me and critical of her. Uncle Richard also followed through on requiring Marina to get counseling. Apparently, the therapist uncovered some deeper issues around entitlement and impulse control that needed professional attention. But the most significant change was in how the family handled conflicts going forward. When cousin Jake had a dispute with his landlord a month later, the family rallied around him instead of demanding he prove his case first. When Aunt Catherine suspected her neighbor was stealing packages, Uncle Richard himself offered to help gather evidence rather than dismissing her concerns. It was as if my ordeal had taught everyone a valuable lesson about believing victims and supporting family members in crisis. 3 months after the coffee shop confrontation, Marina reached out to me directly. She had completed several weeks of therapy and wanted to make a more personal apology. We met at a neutral location, a park near both of our homes. Sophie, I've learned some things about myself in therapy that I want to share with you. She began. I listened as she explained how her therapist had helped her understand that her actions weren't just about needing money quickly. They were rooted in years of getting everything handed to her without consequences, which had created an entitlement mindset where she felt rules didn't apply to her. I convinced myself that taking your money was borrowing, not stealing, because I planned to return it, she explained. But my therapist helped me see that it was stealing regardless of my intentions, and that my plan to return it was probably just a way to minimize the guilt I felt about taking it in the first place. This was the most honest and self-aware I'd ever heard Marina speak. I also want you to know that I understand now how my actions affected you beyond just the financial impact, she continued. You were humiliated in front of the family, made to feel like you were crazy or paranoid, and forced to do detective work to prove your own victimization. That's trauma I caused, and I take full responsibility for it. I appreciated the growth I was hearing, but I wasn't ready to offer immediate forgiveness. Marina, I'm glad you're doing the work to understand what happened and why. That's important for your own growth and for preventing this kind of thing in the future. But you're not ready to forgive me yet. I'm not. And that has to be okay with you. Forgiveness isn't something you get because you've done therapy or made apologies. It's something that might happen over time if your actions consistently demonstrate real change. She nodded, accepting this boundary. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm committed to becoming someone who would never do what I did to you. 6 months later, I got a text from Marina that surprised me. She had gotten a part-time job at a nonprofit organization that helped people recovering from financial fraud and theft. She was using her experience as someone who had committed financial crimes to help victims navigate the emotional aftermath of being stolen from. I know this doesn't undo what I did to you, her text read, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to use this experience to prevent other people from going through what you went through. That text did more to move me toward eventual forgiveness than all the apologies and therapy updates combined. It showed me that Marina was taking concrete action to turn her mistake into something constructive for others. A year after the original theft, Marina and I had coffee together for the first time since the confrontation. She looked different, more humble, less entitled. She talked about her work at the nonprofit, her continued therapy, and her changed relationship with money and material possessions. "I've been wanting to ask you something," she said near the end of our conversation. "Okay. Do you think there's a chance we could rebuild some kind of relationship over time? Not back to where we were, but maybe something new and healthier?" I considered the question carefully. "Marina, I think that's possible, but it would have to be built on complete honesty and respect for boundaries. And it would have to be gradual." "I'd like that," she said. "I miss having you as family." "I miss the family member I thought you were," I replied. "But maybe we can build something based on who we actually are instead of who we thought we were." That conversation happened 6 months ago. Since then, Marina and I have been slowly rebuilding a relationship based on honesty rather than assumption. We text occasionally, meet for coffee every few months, and she updates me on her continued therapy and volunteer work. I won't say I completely trust her yet, and I may never trust her the way I did before, but I respect the work she's put into changing herself, and I appreciate that she's never pushed me to forgive faster than I was ready to. Uncle Richard and I have also rebuilt our relationship, though it took longer. His willingness to immediately support Marina's story over mine had damaged something fundamental between us. But over time, as he consistently demonstrated that he had learned from his mistake, we found our way back to a respectful family relationship. The whole experience taught me valuable lessons about trusting my instincts, documenting evidence, and standing up for myself even when family members try to gaslight me into believing I'm wrong. It also taught me that sometimes the people closest to us are capable of betraying us in ways we never imagined. But that doesn't mean relationships can't be rebuilt if there's genuine accountability and change. Most importantly, it taught me that demanding proof of victimization is often just another way of victimizing someone. When someone you care about tells you they've been wronged, the first response should be support and investigation, not skepticism and demands for evidence. The ATM camera that caught Marina red-handed didn't just solve a theft case. It exposed family dynamics that needed to change, forced conversations that needed to happen, and ultimately led to growth and healing that wouldn't have occurred otherwise. Sometimes the proof we demand reveals much more than we bargained for. The real consequences of Marina's actions didn't fully surface until 3 weeks after our coffee shop confrontation. I thought the worst was behind us, that the family had processed the truth and we could all move forward with a clearer understanding of what had happened. I was wrong. It started with a phone call from my cousin Jake at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night. I almost didn't answer because late-night calls from family usually meant drama, but something made me pick up. "Sophie, we need to talk." Jake's voice was tense, urgent. "Can you meet me tomorrow morning? There's something you need to know about Marina." My stomach dropped. "What now?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me at the diner on Oak Street at 8 a.m.? I agreed, though sleep didn't come easily that night. My mind raced through possibilities. Had Marina stolen from someone else? Had she lied about something else during our confrontation? Had Uncle Richard discovered additional deceptions? The next morning, Jake was already waiting in a corner booth when I arrived. Dark circles under his eyes and a manila folder on the table in front of him. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "Jake, what's going on?" He slid the folder across to me. "Open it." Inside were bank statements, credit card bills, and printed emails. I recognized Marina's name on several of the documents, but the amounts made my blood run cold. "Jake, where did you get these?" "Marina asked me to help her organize her finances for a meeting with a debt counselor. She said her therapist recommended getting her financial situation under control as part of her recovery process."
But Sophie, I can't keep this secret. This is criminal behavior on a massive scale. I studied the spreadsheet again, noticing something that made my stomach churn. Next to several entries were notes like paid back partial or smoothed over. Marina had been caught before and had managed to explain away or partially repay smaller thefts, which had allowed her to continue the pattern. The $3,000 from me wasn't about paying off debts, I realized aloud. It was about funding this whole operation. She needed cash to pay back other family members she'd stolen from so they wouldn't get suspicious. Jake nodded grimly. "That's exactly what I think. She was using new thefts to cover old thefts.
like a Ponzi scheme within our own family. How much total? Based on this spreadsheet, over $15,000 from family members alone. But there might be more. This only shows what she documented. I leaned back in the booth, overwhelmed by the magnitude of Marina's betrayal. Every family gathering for the past 2 years had been an opportunity for her to victimize people who loved her. Every friendly offer to help with bills or split expenses had been calculated theft. Jake, we have to tell the family, all of them. I know, but Sophie, this is going to destroy Uncle Richard. Marina is his whole world. Finding out that she's been using family gatherings to systematically steal from everyone is going to crush him. I thought about Uncle Richard's reaction to my initial accusation. How he demanded proof and defended Marina's character. Now we had proof that her character was far worse than any of us had imagined. He needs to know. They all need to know. And Marina needs to face real consequences this time, not just therapy and apologies. Jake was quiet for a moment, then pulled out his phone. I have something else to show you. He opened his text messages and showed me a conversation with Marina from the night before, after he'd confronted her about the financial documents. Marina: Jake, please don't tell anyone about this. I can fix it. I just need time. Marina, you stole from Grandma Helen. She's 78 years old and living on a fixed income. I know it looks bad, but I was always planning to pay everyone back. The money from Sophie was going to help me start making things right. You stole from Sophie to pay back other people you'd stolen from. That's not making things right. That's robbing Peter to pay Paul. You don't understand the pressure I was under. I had debts and bills, and everyone always expected me to have money because Dad spoils me. I couldn't disappoint them. So you stole from them. I was going to pay it all back once I got my trust fund next year. The conversation continued, but I'd read enough. Marina was still rationalizing her behavior, still making excuses, still focused on managing the consequences rather than taking genuine responsibility for her actions. Jake, she's not sorry. She's sorry she got caught, but she's not actually sorry for what she did. I'm starting to see that. The therapy seems to have helped her understand why she did it, but I don't think it's changed her fundamental attitude about taking things that don't belong to her. I made a decision that would change everything for our family. We're calling a family meeting. Everyone who's on this list, plus Uncle Richard. We're going to present all of this evidence at once and let Marina explain herself to everyone she stole from. Jake, that's going to be brutal. Good. Brutal is what she deserves. These people trusted her, and she violated that trust repeatedly over years. They have a right to know what she did and to decide for themselves how they want to handle it. Jake nodded slowly. You're right. When do you want to do this? This weekend. Uncle Richard's house, since it's central for everyone. Tell Marina she needs to be there, but don't tell her why. Let her think it's just a regular family gathering. What if she doesn't show up? Then we tell everyone what we discovered and let them know she was too cowardly to face them. Either way, the truth comes out. That afternoon, Jake and I spent hours making phone calls to family members, arranging for everyone to gather on Saturday afternoon. We told each person we had something important to share, but didn't give specifics. We wanted everyone to hear the full truth at the same time. Aunt Catherine was the hardest call to make because I knew from the spreadsheet that she'd been targeted multiple times over the past year. She'd trusted Marina to handle group expenses for family events and had been systematically overcharged. Sophie, is everything okay? You sound serious. We'll explain everything on Saturday. Just please make sure you're there. It's important that the whole family hears this together. You're making me nervous. Is someone sick? No one's sick, but there's a situation that affects multiple family members, and we need to address it as a group. By Thursday evening, we had confirmations from 8 family members, including Uncle Richard and Marina. The stage was set for what I knew would be one of the most difficult conversations our family had ever faced. Friday night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the faces of the people who would be in that room tomorrow, people who had no idea they'd been systematically victimized by someone they loved and trusted. Grandma Helen, who had struggled financially since Grandpa passed, but had always been generous with her grandchildren. Aunt Catherine, who worked 2 jobs to support her family but still always offered to help with group expenses. Uncle Mark, who had been putting money aside for his daughter's college fund. Marina had stolen from them all, and they didn't even know it. Saturday morning arrived gray and rainy, matching my mood perfectly. I arrived at Uncle Richard's house 30 minutes early, carrying a folder with copies of all the evidence Jake had shown me. My hands were steady, but my heart was racing. Uncle Richard greeted me at the door with a confused smile. "Sophie, you're early. Marina said you had something important to share with everyone, but she was very mysterious about it." "Where is Marina?" "Upstairs, getting ready. She seems nervous about whatever this is." I bet she was nervous. She had to know that eventually her financial records would expose the full scope of her theft. Maybe she was hoping to control the narrative somehow. Or maybe she was planning to confess before I could reveal everything. Family members began arriving around 1 o'clock. Grandma Helen came with Aunt Catherine. Uncle Mark brought his wife and teenage daughter. Cousin Rebecca arrived with her boyfriend. By 1:30, everyone was gathered in Uncle Richard's living room except Marina. "I'll go get her," Uncle Richard said, starting toward the stairs.
Actually, let's wait a few more minutes, I suggested. I want to make sure everyone's here before we start. At exactly 2 o'clock, Marina finally came downstairs. She'd clearly been crying, and she looked like she hadn't slept. When she saw the assembled family, her face went completely pale. "Marina, there you are," Uncle Richard said. "Sophie has something important to share with all of us." All eyes turned to me. I looked around the room at these people I loved, people who had supported me through the ordeal with my stolen car money, people who had no idea they were about to learn they'd been victimized too. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "What I'm about to share is going to be difficult to hear, but everyone in this room has a right to know the truth." I pulled out the folder and set it on the coffee table. 3 weeks ago, we discovered that Marina stole $3,000 from me. She confessed, returned the money, and we thought that was the end of it. Marina was staring at the floor, her hands clenched in her lap. But it wasn't the end of it. This week, Jake discovered something that changes everything we thought we knew about that incident. I opened the folder and pulled out Marina's handwritten spreadsheet. Marina has been systematically stealing from family members for over 2 years. This is a list, in her own handwriting, documenting thefts from 8 different family members totaling over $15,000. The silence in the room was deafening. I could see family members looking at each other, then at the paper, then at Marina, trying to process what I just said. Grandma Helen spoke first, her voice small and confused. "Marina, dear, what is Sophie talking about?" Marina looked up, with tears streaming down her face. "Grandma, I can explain." "Then explain," Uncle Mark said sharply. "Explain how you stole from your own grandmother." "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," Marina began, but I cut her off. "Marina, before you say anything else, everyone needs to see the evidence." I pulled out the bank statements and credit card bills Jake had shown me. Marina has over $40,000 in debt that no one in the family knew about. She's been using money stolen from family members to make minimum payments on credit cards and loans. Aunt Catherine reached for the spreadsheet with shaking hands. When she saw her name with $1,500 next to it, she gasped. "Marina, that money I gave you for the family vacation deposit, you said the hotel required a higher deposit than expected." "It did," Marina protested. "I mean, it required a deposit, but you inflated the amount and kept the difference," I finished. "Just like you did with restaurant bills, grocery runs, and any other group expense you offered to handle." Uncle Richard was staring at his daughter like he'd never seen her before. "Marina, is this true?" "Daddy, I was going to pay everyone back. I have a trust fund coming next year, and I was going to make everything right." "That's not the point," Cousin Rebecca stood up, her face flushed with anger. "You stole from us. You looked us in the eye and lied to us repeatedly." "The $800 you took from Rebecca," I continued, consulting the spreadsheet, "was money she'd saved for her mother's medical bills." Rebecca nodded, tears in her eyes.
I thought I'd lost it somewhere. I searched my apartment for days and felt so stupid for being irresponsible with money Mom needed. And the money you took from Grandma Helen, I looked at Marina directly, was from her Social Security check. She had to choose between medications and groceries that month because she thought she'd made a mistake in her budgeting. Grandma Helen was crying now, not from sadness, but from a kind of bewildered hurt that was painful to witness. Marina, sweetheart, if you needed money, why didn't you just ask me? I would have helped you. Because she didn't want help, Uncle Mark said bitterly. She wanted free money with no accountability. Marina was sobbing now, but I wasn't finished. The family needed to understand the full scope of what had been done to them. The worst part is that Marina has been caught before. According to her own notes, she's partially paid back some family members when they started getting suspicious, which allowed her to continue stealing from others. I pulled out Jake's text conversation with Marina from Thursday night. Even now, after being confronted with all of this evidence, Marina is still making excuses and trying to minimize what she did. Uncle Richard read the text conversation in silence, his face growing darker with each message. When he finished, he looked at Marina with an expression I'd never seen before. "You told Jake you were under pressure to have money because I spoil you?" Marina nodded miserably. "So my generosity with you somehow justified stealing from your grandmother? From your cousins who work multiple jobs to make ends meet? Daddy, that's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean, Marina? Because it sounds like you're blaming me for your decision to steal from our family." The room was tense with raw emotion. Years of trust had been shattered in the span of 30 minutes, and everyone was processing their own feelings of betrayal and violation. Aunt Catherine spoke up, her voice thick with hurt. "Marina, I defended you when Sophie first made her accusation. I told people that Sophie might be mistaken, that you would never do something like that." "I know, and I'm sorry." "Sorry isn't enough," Aunt Catherine's composure cracked. "I vouched for your character while you were actively stealing from me. You made me complicit in gaslighting Sophie." That was the moment I realized the full impact of Marina's actions went beyond just the money. She had corrupted family relationships, turned people against each other, and created an atmosphere of mistrust that would take years to repair. "Marina," I said quietly, "I need you to understand something. This isn't just about theft. You poisoned our family dynamics. You made us doubt each other, defend someone who was victimizing us, and dismiss legitimate concerns from other family members." Marina looked around the room at the faces of people she'd hurt, and for the first time, I saw something that might have been genuine remorse in her expression. "I know I can't undo what I did," she said, her voice barely audible, "but I want to make it right." "How?" Uncle Mark demanded. "How do you make right 2 years of systematic theft and deception?" "I can pay everyone back. My trust fund will be available next year, and I can pay back every penny with interest." "That's not good enough," Grandma Helen said, surprising everyone with the firmness in her voice. "Marina, dear, you need help that money can't provide. This level of deception isn't normal behavior." Uncle Richard was quiet for a long moment, then spoke in a voice I'd never heard from him before. "Marina, you're going to face real consequences for this. Not just family consequences, but legal ones." Marina's head snapped up. "Daddy, what do you mean?" "I mean, we're filing police reports for theft."
All of us. You're going to be charged criminally for what you've done. But I'm your daughter. And they're my family too, Uncle Richard gestured around the room. You stole from your 78-year-old grandmother, Marina. You stole medical bill money from your cousin. You violated the trust of every person in this room, and there have to be real consequences. The finality in his voice shocked everyone, including me. I'd expected Uncle Richard to be protective of Marina, to try to handle things within the family to avoid public embarrassment. "Uncle Richard," I said carefully, "are you sure about involving the police?" "Sophie, you had to gather evidence and prove your case to me because I didn't believe my own niece when she told me she'd been victimized. That's a failure I have to live with. But I won't compound that failure by protecting someone who has systematically preyed on our family. Marina was crying hysterically now. Daddy, please, I'll go to therapy. I'll pay everyone back. I'll do whatever you want. You'll do all of those things, Uncle Richard said firmly, and you'll also face criminal charges because that's what happens when you commit crimes. Over the next hour, family members took turns expressing their hurt, anger, and disappointment. The stories that emerged painted a picture of Marina as someone who had weaponized family love and trust for financial gain. Cousin Rebecca talked about how she'd blamed herself for losing the medical bill money, how she'd felt stupid and irresponsible for months. Aunt Catherine described the guilt she'd felt for not being more careful with group expenses, not knowing she was actually being stolen from. Uncle Mark revealed that he'd dipped into his daughter's college fund to cover what he thought were increased costs for family events. Each story was a testament to how Marina's actions had rippled through the family in ways she probably never considered. She hadn't just stolen money, she'd stolen peace of mind, self-confidence, and trust in family relationships. When everyone had spoken, Uncle Richard made the decision that would define our family's path forward. We're going to the police station together, tomorrow morning. Everyone who was stolen from will file their own report and we'll present all the evidence as a group. Richard, Aunt Catherine said hesitantly, are you sure about this? Once we involve the police, there's no going back. There's already no going back, he replied. Marina made sure of that when she decided to systematically steal from her own family for 2 years. Marina looked around the room one last time, perhaps hoping someone would speak up in her defense. No one did. I understand, she said quietly. I'll cooperate with whatever you all decide to do. As family members began to leave Uncle Richard's house that afternoon, the atmosphere was somber but oddly relieved. The truth was finally out, all of it, and everyone could stop wondering if they were crazy or forgetful or bad with money. But I knew this was just the beginning of a long process of healing and rebuilding trust. Filing police reports would be emotionally difficult for everyone involved. Marina would likely face jail time, which would be traumatic for Uncle Richard, despite his resolve to hold her accountable. That evening, I sat in my first car, the Honda Civic I'd bought with money that had been stolen and returned, and thought about how dramatically my life had changed in just a few months. I'd started this journey as a victim seeking justice for a single theft. Now I was part of exposing a criminal enterprise that had victimized my entire family. The next morning, 8 family members walked into the police station together. The detective who took our statements was amazed by the scope and documentation of Marina's thefts. In 20 years of investigating financial crimes, he told us, I've rarely seen such detailed record-keeping by the perpetrator. She basically documented her own criminal activity. Marina was arrested that afternoon and charged with multiple counts of theft and fraud. Uncle Richard posted bail, but insisted she move out of his house pending trial. The local newspaper picked up the story because of the unusual nature of systematic theft within a family. The headline read, "Local woman charged with stealing $15,000 from family members over 2 years." Reading about our family's trauma in the newspaper was surreal, but it also felt like a form of public accountability. Marina's actions hadn't just hurt us privately, they damaged the fabric of family trust in a way that deserved public acknowledgement. 3 months later, Marina pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, 3 years of probation, and full restitution to all family members. At her sentencing hearing, the judge made remarks that stayed with me long after we left the courthouse. Miss Marina, you didn't just steal money from your family members. You stole their sense of security, their ability to trust, and their peace of mind. Financial crimes within families are particularly harmful because they violate the basic assumption that our loved ones will protect us, not prey on us. Marina read a prepared statement apologizing to each family member by name and acknowledging the full scope of harm she'd caused. It was the first time I'd heard her take complete responsibility without making excuses or deflecting blame. But even with Marina facing real consequences, the healing process for our family was just beginning. Trust, once broken on such a fundamental level, doesn't return easily or quickly. Grandma Helen started questioning every financial interaction she had with family members, even legitimate ones.
Aunt Catherine became reluctant to handle group expenses, even when it would be convenient for everyone. Uncle Mark struggled with guilt over not protecting his mother and sister from someone he'd raised. We started having monthly family meetings to address ongoing concerns and rebuild communication. The first few meetings were awkward and tense, but gradually we developed new patterns of interaction based on transparency and accountability. 6 months after Marina's sentencing, something unexpected happened. I received a letter from a stranger named Patricia who had read about our case in the newspaper. Patricia wrote that she'd been systematically stolen from by her own daughter for 3 years, but had never reported it because of family pressure and shame. Reading about our family's decision to pursue criminal charges had given her the courage to file her own police report. Your family's bravery in holding your loved one accountable helped me realize that protecting someone from consequences isn't actually protecting them at all, she wrote. It's enabling them to continue harming others. Over the following months, I received several similar letters from people who had been financially victimized by family members but felt too ashamed or guilty to seek justice. Our story had apparently resonated with other families dealing with similar betrayals. A year after Marina's sentencing, I was contacted by a victim advocacy organization asking if I would speak at a conference about financial crimes within families. The invitation surprised me, but I realized I had learned valuable lessons that might help other people in similar situations. My presentation focused on 3 key points: the importance of believing victims, even when the accused person is someone you love, the necessity of documenting evidence when dealing with financial crimes, and the value of seeking real accountability rather than just private apologies. The response was overwhelming. After my presentation, dozens of people approached me with their own stories of being financially victimized by family members. Many had never reported the crimes because they felt ashamed or didn't want to, quote-unquote, destroy the family. I started connecting these victims with legal resources and support groups. What had begun as my personal quest for justice had evolved into advocacy for other families dealing with similar betrayals. 2 years after the original theft, Marina was released from prison and began the process of paying restitution to family members. She had continued therapy throughout her incarceration and seemed to have gained genuine insight into her behavior. We had coffee together for the first time since her sentencing, and the conversation was different from any we'd had before. Marina spoke about taking full responsibility for her actions without deflecting or making excuses. She talked about the impact of her choices on each family member individually, showing an understanding of harm that had been missing from her earlier apologies. "Sophie, I know I can't undo what I did to you and to our family," she said, "but I want you to know that facing real consequences was the best thing that could have happened to me. The therapy in prison and the accountability forced me to confront parts of myself I'd been avoiding for years. I appreciated her growth, but I was honest about my own ongoing healing process. Marina, I'm glad you're doing better, but I want you to understand that forgiveness and rebuilding trust are separate things. I can forgive you for what you did, but trusting you again will take time and consistent behavior." "I understand that," she replied, "and I'm prepared to earn back whatever trust is possible, even if it takes years." 3 years after the original theft, our family dynamics had stabilized into something healthier than what existed before Marina's crimes were exposed. We had clearer boundaries, better communication, and a deeper appreciation for honesty and accountability. Uncle Richard and I had rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and acknowledgement of past mistakes. He never again dismissed a family member's concerns without investigation, and I learned to appreciate the difficulty of balancing love for a child with the need for justice. Marina continued making restitution payments and attending therapy. She found work at a nonprofit organization helping other people recovering from financial addiction and criminal behavior. Her lived experience with the consequences of financial crimes made her uniquely qualified to help others avoid similar paths. The Honda Civic I'd bought with my recovered money served me well through 2 job changes and my eventual transfer to a 4-year university.
Every time I drove it, I remembered the lesson that standing up for yourself and demanding accountability isn't just about personal justice. It's about protecting others who might be victimized if harmful behavior goes unchecked. The ATM camera footage that started everything became a symbol for our family of the importance of seeking truth, even when it's uncomfortable. We learned that sometimes the evidence we need is hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to look for it and present it. Most importantly, we learned that healing from betrayal requires more than apologies and good intentions. It requires accountability, consequences, changed behavior over time, and a willingness to rebuild relationships on new foundations of honesty and respect. Marina's systematic theft had nearly destroyed our family's ability to trust each other. But in the end, our collective decision to seek truth and demand accountability made us stronger and more resilient than we'd ever been before. 5 years had passed since that rainy Saturday when our family gathered to learn the truth about Marina's crimes. The anniversary always brought mixed emotions, but this year felt different. This year, I was sitting in my own apartment, which I'd purchased with savings from the job I'd gotten after transferring to the state university, looking at an invitation that represented how far we'd all come. Marina was getting married. The man she'd met through her work at the nonprofit organization specialized in helping families rebuild after financial trauma. He knew her complete history, understood the depth of her past mistakes, and had seen her genuine transformation over the past 3 years. Their relationship had developed slowly, built on a foundation of complete honesty that Marita had learned was essential for any healthy connection. The invitation was simple, elegant, and included a handwritten note that made me pause. "Sophie, I know I have no right to expect you to celebrate with me after everything I put our family through, but you've been part of my journey toward becoming someone worth trusting, and I hope you'll consider being part of this new beginning. I understand if you can't, and I'll respect whatever decision you make." I set the invitation on my kitchen table next to my laptop, where I'd been working on the final chapter of my book about financial crimes within families. The memoir had started as a way to process my own experience, but had evolved into something larger when my editor suggested including stories from other victims I'd connected with through my advocacy work. The book would be published in 3 months, and early reviews suggested it might actually help people. The advance copy I'd received yesterday included a foreword written by Patricia, the woman who had first contacted me after reading about our case in the newspaper. She'd become a close friend and fellow advocate, and her words captured something I'd struggled to articulate about the ripple effects of family financial abuse. "Sophie's story isn't just about one theft or one family," Patricia had written. "It's about the courage required to demand accountability from people we love, even when it's easier to stay silent. It's about the difference between enabling harmful behavior and supporting genuine change." My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts about the wedding invitation. It was Dr. Martinez, the therapist who had been working with our family on and off for the past 5 years. She'd called to check in before our final family session scheduled for next week. "Sophie, how are you feeling about closing this chapter of family therapy?" It was a good question. The monthly sessions had been essential in helping us rebuild trust and communication, but lately we'd all felt ready to manage our relationships without professional mediation. "I think we're ready," I told her. "The dynamics feel stable now, and everyone has learned to address concerns directly instead of letting them fester." "And how do you feel about Marina's upcoming wedding?" I'd been processing this question for weeks since receiving the invitation. "It's complicated. I'm genuinely happy that she's found someone who accepts her completely while still holding her accountable, but attending feels like a big step that I'm not sure I'm ready for." "What would help you decide?" "I think I need to have a conversation with Marina first, a real conversation about where we are now and what our relationship looks like going forward." Dr. Martinez agreed this was a wise approach. We'd all learned that avoiding difficult conversations only created space for misunderstandings and resentment to grow. That evening, I called Marina and asked if we could meet for coffee. She agreed immediately, suggesting the same neutral cafe where we'd had several important conversations over the past few years. When I arrived, Marina was already there, looking nervous but determined. She'd changed significantly since her release from prison. The entitled, careless attitude had been replaced by genuine humility and a careful consideration for how her actions affected others. "Thank you for calling," she said as I sat down. "I wasn't sure if you'd received the invitation or if you were just ignoring it." "I received it, and I've been thinking about it a lot." Marina nodded, waiting for me to continue. She'd learned not to push for responses or try to manage other people's emotions. "Marina, I want to be honest with you about something. I'm proud of the work you've done to change yourself,
The therapy, the restitution payments, the volunteer work, the way you've handled accountability without making excuses. It's genuine growth that I respect. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. But I also want you to understand that attending your wedding feels significant to me. It feels like a public statement that I've fully forgiven you and that our relationship has been completely restored. Marina's expression grew serious. Sophie, I would never want you to make a public statement that doesn't reflect your true feelings. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Because the truth is, I have forgiven you. But forgiving someone and being close to them again are two different things. I paused, choosing my words carefully. We have a respectful relationship now based on honesty and accountability. We can have coffee and update each other on our lives. We can be cordial at family gatherings. But we're not close like we were before, and I'm not sure we ever will be. Marina absorbed this quietly, then responded with characteristic thoughtfulness. I understand that, and I accept it. Sophie, you don't owe me closeness or intimacy just because I've done the work to change. You get to decide what level of relationship feels safe and authentic for you. Her response demonstrated the emotional maturity she'd developed through years of therapy and accountability. The old Marina would have pushed for more, would have tried to convince me that enough time had passed or that she'd proven herself sufficiently. I appreciate that you understand, I continued, and I want you to know that I am genuinely happy for you. Finding someone who knows your complete story and chooses to build a life with you anyway is beautiful. David has been incredible. He's never tried to minimize what I did or excuse it, but he also doesn't define me entirely by my worst actions. It's taught me a lot about the difference between accepting consequences and being permanently defined by mistakes. We talked for another hour about her relationship, her continued work at the nonprofit, and her plans for the future. Marina had completed her master's degree in social work while on probation and was considering pursuing additional training in financial counseling. I want to dedicate my career to helping families recover from financial abuse, she explained. Not just the victims, but also people like me who have caused this kind of harm and want to make different choices. By the end of our conversation, I'd made my decision about the wedding. Marina, I won't be attending your wedding, but it's not because I'm angry or trying to punish you. It's because attending would represent a level of celebration and intimacy that doesn't match where our relationship actually is. Marina nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I understand completely. And Sophie, thank you for being honest with me instead of just avoiding the conversation or making excuses. But I would like to send a gift and a note wishing you both well, because I do genuinely hope you have a happy marriage built on the honesty and accountability you've both learned to value. That would mean everything to me. As we prepared to leave the cafe, Marina hesitated, then spoke again. Sophie, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Do you think there's any chance that someday, maybe years from now, we might have a closer relationship again? Or do you think this respectful distance is probably permanent? It was a fair question, and one I'd wondered about myself. I honestly don't know. I've learned not to make predictions about future relationships. But I can tell you that if it ever happens, it will be because we both genuinely want it, not because we feel obligated by family expectations or the passage of time. Marina smiled, a real smile, without the desperate edge that had characterized our interactions for so long.
That's exactly the right answer. 3 weeks later, Marina's wedding took place at a small venue downtown. I didn't attend, but Aunt Catherine sent me photos afterward. Marina looked genuinely happy, surrounded by family members who had chosen to celebrate with her while maintaining their own boundaries and expectations. Uncle Richard had walked her down the aisle, but his speech at the reception acknowledged the complexity of their relationship. According to Aunt Catherine, he'd spoken about love, accountability, and the difference between supporting someone's growth and enabling their harmful choices. It was emotional, Aunt Catherine told me over the phone, but it felt honest. No one pretended that everything was perfect or that the past didn't matter, but everyone seemed genuinely hopeful about Marina's future. A month after the wedding, I received an unexpected phone call from a producer at a major network who had read an advance copy of my book. She wanted to discuss the possibility of adapting my story for a documentary about family financial crimes within families. Your case is unique because of how well documented everything was, and because your family chose to pursue criminal accountability, she explained. But we're also interested in the long-term impact and healing process. How has your family rebuilt trust over time? The conversation was intriguing, but I felt hesitant about exposing our family to that level of public scrutiny. I asked for time to consider the proposal and to discuss it with family members who would be affected. That evening, I called Uncle Richard to get his thoughts on the documentary proposal. "Sophie, I think the decision has to be yours," he said. "You're the one who found the courage to pursue the truth when the rest of us were willing to accept lies for the sake of family peace." "But it would affect everyone: Marina's new marriage, your relationship with her, the whole family dynamic." "All of those relationships have been built on a foundation of honesty about what happened. A documentary wouldn't change the facts, just make them more public." I appreciated his perspective, but I wanted to hear from Marina as well. Despite our limited relationship, I felt she deserved input on a decision that would affect her life significantly. When I called Marina to discuss the documentary proposal, her response surprised me. "Sophie, I think you should do it if you believe it will help other families. What I did was criminal behavior that deserves to be discussed publicly if it can prevent other people from being victimized." "But Marina, this would mean national exposure of everything that happened. Your arrest, the trial, the impact on our family, that's a lot to have permanently documented." I've learned that trying to hide from consequences or minimize public accountability just perpetuates shame and secrecy. If my story can help other people recognize financial abuse in their own families or encourage them to seek justice, then the embarrassment is worth it. Her willingness to accept public scrutiny as part of holding herself accountable represented profound growth from the person who had once begged family members to keep her crimes secret. After consulting with several other family members, I decided to move forward with the documentary. The production process took 8 months and included interviews with family members, law enforcement officials, financial crime experts, and other families who had experienced similar betrayals. The documentary aired on a Tuesday evening in November, exactly 6 years after the original theft. I watched it with a small group of friends in my apartment, nervous about how our story would be received by a national audience. The producer had done an excellent job of presenting our experience as both a cautionary tale about family financial abuse and a story of healing through accountability. The documentary didn't shy away from the painful aspects of Marina's crimes or the long process of rebuilding trust, but it also showed genuine transformation and growth. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours of the broadcast, my email inbox was flooded with messages from viewers sharing their own experiences with financial abuse by family members. Many had never reported the crimes or sought justice because they felt ashamed or didn't want to destroy the family. One message particularly stayed with me. "Your family's courage in demanding accountability gave me permission to file a police report against my brother, who has been stealing from our elderly parents for 3 years. I've been making excuses for him because I didn't want to ruin his life, but I realize now that protecting him was actually enabling him to continue hurting people I love." Over the following weeks, I received dozens of similar messages. Victim advocacy organizations reported increased calls from people seeking help with family financial abuse. Several law enforcement agencies reached out, asking for input on training programs for officers investigating these types of crimes. The documentary had achieved something I'd never expected. It had become a catalyst for broader conversations about accountability, family dynamics, and the courage required to seek justice from people we love. 6 months after the documentary aired, I was invited to testify before a congressional subcommittee considering legislation to strengthen protections for elderly victims of family financial abuse. Sitting in that formal chamber, speaking to elected officials about Grandma Helen's experience and the systemic issues that make older adults vulnerable to financial exploitation by their own children and grandchildren, felt surreal. Financial abuse within families is often unreported because victims feel ashamed or don't want to criminalize their loved ones, I explained to the subcommittee. But protecting perpetrators from consequences doesn't help anyone. It enables continued abuse and prevents genuine healing for families and individuals. The legislation eventually passed, creating stronger penalties for financial crimes against elderly family members and providing additional resources for victim support and family mediation services.
A year after the documentary, I was offered a position with a national organization focused on family financial abuse prevention and recovery. The job would involve developing educational programs, training law enforcement, and supporting other families navigating similar crises. Taking the position meant leaving my original career path, but it felt like a natural evolution of the advocacy work I'd been doing informally for years. My personal experience with family financial abuse had given me unique insights that could help other people, and I'd learned that meaningful work often emerges from our most difficult experiences. On my last day at my previous job, I cleaned out my desk and found the original ATM footage I'd recorded on my phone 6 years earlier. I'd saved it as evidence, but now it represented something larger. Proof that seeking truth, even when it's difficult and painful, can lead to growth and healing that seemed impossible at the beginning of the crisis. That evening, I drove my Honda Civic, still running reliably after all these years, to Uncle Richard's house for a family dinner. These gatherings had become monthly traditions, casual meals where everyone could stay connected without the intensity of our earlier family meetings. Marina and her husband David had become regular attendees. The dynamic felt natural now. No one pretended the past hadn't happened, but no one was defined entirely by it either. Marina participated in conversations, shared updates about her work and marriage, and accepted the boundaries that different family members had established with grace and understanding. During dinner, Grandma Helen, now 84 and still sharp, made an observation that captured how our family had evolved. You know, before all this happened with Marina, we used to avoid talking about difficult things because we didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings or cause drama. But now we address concerns directly, and even though the conversations are sometimes uncomfortable, our relationships feel more honest. She was right. The crisis that had nearly destroyed our family's ability to trust each other had ultimately taught us to communicate more effectively and to value accountability over comfort. After dinner, as family members were preparing to leave, Marina approached me privately. "Sophie, I wanted you to know that David and I watched the documentary together last week. It was hard to see everything laid out like that, but I'm grateful you decided to share our story." How did David feel about seeing all the details? He said it helped him understand not just what I did, but how systematically I deceived everyone. He'd heard the facts, but seeing the timeline and the impact on each family member made it more real for him. Marina paused, then continued. He also said he was proud to be married to someone who was willing to accept full public accountability for her actions. He said it showed him the kind of person I've become, not just the person I used to be. Her husband's perspective represented something beautiful about redemption and second chances. David had chosen to love Marina not despite her past, but because of how she'd handled accountability and change. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how dramatically all our lives had changed since that Saturday afternoon when Marina stole $3,000 from my purse. The theft had been devastating at the time, but it had also revealed systemic deception that needed to be exposed. Pursuing justice had been painful for everyone involved, but it had ultimately led to genuine healing and growth. The ATM camera that caught Marina red-handed was just the beginning. The real work of rebuilding trust, establishing accountability, and learning to love each other honestly had taken years and continued to be an ongoing process. But sitting in my car outside my apartment building, I felt something I hadn't expected at the beginning of this journey: gratitude. Not gratitude for being victimized, but gratitude for learning that demanding accountability from people we love isn't cruelty. It's actually one of the most loving things we can do. Marina's crimes had forced our entire family to examine our values, communication patterns, and definitions of love and loyalty. We've learned that protecting someone from consequences isn't protection at all. It's enabling them to continue causing harm to themselves and others. The book I'd written was being translated into multiple languages. The documentary continued to spark conversations about family financial abuse around the world. The legislative changes I'd advocated for were helping other families access resources and justice. But perhaps most importantly, our family had learned to love each other with honesty, accountability, and respect for boundaries. Marina had rebuilt her life on a foundation of transparency and responsibility. Uncle Richard had learned to balance parental love with the need for justice. I had discovered that seeking truth, even when it's painful, can lead to healing that seemed impossible at the beginning of the crisis. The $3,000 Marina stole from my purse had been returned within weeks, but the lessons we'd all learned about accountability, forgiveness, and